And hello, everybody, and welcome to use Autodesk Virtual Academy. I'm Nigel Mbayak. I'm sorry, I'm a little tired this morning. But yeah, today we've got Grayson Donovan here with us. Hi, Grayson. How's it going?
Good, yeah.
Grayson's one of the application engineers here on our team, and you probably haven't seen him in about 8 months because he was
On a project.
working on a project for like 8 months, and so
Yeah,
definitely glad to have him back. He'll be here for the foreseeable future, hopefully, doing AVAs like this every couple of weeks. So definitely you'll see his face on here pretty often. So as you can read on the screen, we got introduction to Inventor API. I'm sure Grayson will explain that a lot better than I can. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move on. We'll go ahead and let Grayson take over from here. But if you do have any questions at all, go ahead and type those into the GoToWebinar chat panel at any time, and we'll definitely get to those during the webcast or at the end during our dedicated Q&A session. We'll definitely pause every once in a while to take some questions. I think we'll probably have more than a few.
There should be a few questions coming.
So with that, I'll pass it on to Grayson, and let's get started.
Awesome. All right, so I wanted to kind of give an overview of what Inventor API is and how we can use it inside of not only just our designs, but for our business as a whole. I noticed that when I was learning how to use iLogic functions, or just really starting with parameters and Excel-based values, I ended up asking myself a lot of questions and trying to do things that I couldn't necessarily get done with iLogic. I had to kind of take a step further and really get into the nuts and bolts of what Inventor is. So for today, kind of what I want to start to run through is really understanding what the API is and what that means. And then I also, there we go. All right. I also want to get into kind of like API versus iLogic and a little bit the limitations that go into each of those and what we can kind of access. One of the big aspects of API is learning the object model. So we're going to cover a little bit of that. Part of the object model, we have different types of objects, and we're going to talk some about that, collection versus standard. And then also really becoming familiar with the VBA environment that's located inside Inventor and how to use things such as like the object browser or live debugging to kind of give a live model of our map. So here, let's do this. First off, what is the API? API is just shorthand for the application programming interface. This one in particular utilizes what's called COM automation, and that's a component object model. Now, what that means is Inventor has a list of different components or objects that correlate to different functions. Be like if you want to create some sketch work, access tools, properties, pretty much anything you can think of. There are some limitations, such as frame generator, that it doesn't really touch in too much, but there are ways that we can kind of circumvent that and get the same results. Another way of putting that is really it's a doorway into the program's functions. So why would I want to use it? Well, a couple things to start off with is mainly creating custom tools and features. Inventor tends to be, general CAD software. You really can use it for any specific or like any industry. We don't really focus on anything in particular other than like manufacturing. What we can use API for is to really set up Inventor so that it's built for your industry. We can get rid of things such as like repetitive design tasks. We can put rules, checks and balances. We can also get in there like custom add-ins, toolbars, right-click menus. I mean, really the sky's the limit. It's kind of just what you can come up with in your imagination is what we can kind of get into API. Now, a lot of the time people just focus on, hey, I can make a cube bigger, or I can push in some parameters down to like a bottom level model. But what API actually lets you do at a grander scale is start to integrate it with your business model. meaning that I can take some data from, say, sales. I could pull it directly into maybe a different engineering software, and then later have that brought back into Inventor to drive my design. You're not necessarily stuck with only being, hey, I want to work on this model, but now I can send out, say, bill of material parts and maybe emails to like production or to purchasing. You can then later probably combine that using like Vault Pro to get into ERP and then MRP integrations. You pretty much get this, this almost like a business automation utility by using API and then also the VBA environment inside of that. How is this different from iLogic? Well, iLogic is really where I started. Pretty much got into parameters like, this is awesome. I can drive my design with parameters, but what can I do for making some rules? So a lot of people get into iLogic, and some of the biggest differences are kind of like, it's really just designed for configurations. If models, drawings, get everything set up, it's used a lot of times in like standard product lines. If you want to have like a configurator for it, a lot of the time that ends up being kind of, you have like a master model. And inside that master model, you want to turn on or off parts, change the visibility. Maybe you want to have some design rules of like, oh, if it's over this much weight, we want to make it, change these dimensions. Just configurations and things. It's nice because it's easy and accessible. You don't really have to have a lot of coding knowledge to use it. If you get into VBNet, when you start talking about forms and kind of user dialogues, all those things you have to hard code. iLogic gives you, forms which are extremely friendly interface to use. It's just drag and drop as far as pictures or parameters or kind of rules that you want to access. You have event triggers, so you can have it set up so anytime I open this document, a specific rule runs. And really to kind of like dive down into iLogic, you just need to know basic conditional statements, if-thens, for each, really kind of just accessing parameters easily through identifiable colors. And then there's also in the left-hand side of the iLogic browser itself, you have like the iLogic functions, which are preloaded depending on what you would need. Now inside of there, you'll also find a little bit of API, but it's super high level stuff where you don't really necessarily know exactly how that's interacting with the software. So if I'm interested in API, how am I going to want to use it? First and foremost is really learning how to navigate the object model. It's a map into how do I get to a specific component or a function of the software. Do I want to get into the application options? Do I want to push some information down into assembly documents? We'll show an example of here shortly, but it's really just this roadmap for the software. Another big one is you have to have some familiarity with coding languages. VBNet and VBA is what Inventor will support natively. I think it'll also do C#. But having any background in Python, Java, HTML, just kind of an understanding of how to read code and then also write it will go a long way in making sure your coding is successful. Another thing that I would highly recommend is accessing the VBA environment. You can write VBA or API code inside of iLogic. It's completely possible. However, you're missing out on a lot of the debugging and then IntelliSense options that you have inside of the VBA. When you are writing out a code, being able to access, say, a live model is, oh, it saves so much time. I don't even know how much I can probably get into that. It's so nice to be able to click through a debug and just really kind of have listed out in front of me exactly where I want to go and how I'm going to get there. Here's a little section of the object model. And if you go ahead on Google and you search this Inventor object model, I believe that they stopped uploading them in 2016. However, they do get installed with 2017 and higher. And this is basically what it looks like. It's pretty massive. You can kind of see over on the little right-hand side, there's that little green strip. That's where it gets into parts. But really, it all starts off from the application. And the object model is then broken down into different types of objects. And I have that shown here where it's a collection and a standard object. The way that I would move through this is I would start off at the application, which would be the inventor application. And then I would probably go down to, say, like the specific document. So it'd be part, assembly, drawing. I then pick a component. So I get the definition of that part. And then now I have access to the parameters. And you can see where we have, application is going to be a standard object. Document is going to be a standard object. Component definition is going to be a standard object. And then we get into our first collection, which is parameters. So let's talk a little bit about those objects. What are collection and standard objects? Really, they are just a terminology to say, hey, I want to access a specific inventor function or a collection of functions. And collection objects are really just a group of related objects. That would be like saying, if I was looking at the parameters, I'd have a list of all the single parameters inside of that. It's like an all-encompassing bubble. What they also allow you to do is create new objects or standard objects. So what you can do is, like, if I enter, say, the collection object for parameters, I could use that to create a new parameter. Collection objects also support the use of count and item. So what that means is I can get a, an integer-based value of, say, the parameters, how many parameters I have inside of that. And then I can also use item to pick a specific one based off of, say, like what number it is. Some collection objects will also allow you to use a name-based identifier. I believe features is one of those. So you can say, like, hey, rather than I want the second extrusion, I want the extrusion named extrusion 1. That's really the biggest difference between standard objects. Really, standard objects are just going to be like, hey, I'm looking for a specific parameter. And then a lot of the time, those are also included inside of your collection. So we have a parameter object that's part of the parameters collection objects. We're talking a little bit about the VBA environment, and I did mention the object browser. So what this does is it gives us real-time access to all of Inventor's objects. It lets us search for something, and then we can see the properties, the methods, the events that we can extract from that, pretty much the actions and where we can go next. It'll give us a little blurb as far as how to use it. It gives us the type of object that we receive back, be it like a parameter, a string value, just a couple different things. We also get IntelliSense, which is amazing that it just, as you're starting to write out that code, it will fill in what the next available option should be, and you can go through that list and select them. The debugging utility is also like, I'll show an example of that, and pretty much that gives us a live model or a live version of the Inventor objects. And we have a little plus sign that we can expand and then just move down through the iterations. So what I want to do is we're going to hop into a little bit of an example. I'm going to kind of show you what we've been talking about so far. All right. So here I've got a little basic cube. And we've got 3 extrusions. So we have extrusion 1, fillet 2, and fillet 1. And what I want to do is I want to make some code that is going to search through all my features. And it's only going to delete out a fillet that's called fillet 1. In order to access the VBA environment, we're going to go to Tools, and then we're going to go to the VBA editor. So inside of here, this is kind of what it'll look like. We got a little code over on the right. It says this document. We have some watches going on here. And I really kind of want to take a look at, how do I get to where I want to go? So let's do this. I'm going to go option explicit. We're going to make a public sub, and we're going to call this fillet delete. And we're going to start off with a little bit of debugging here. So I'm going to go debug.print. And then we're going to get into this application, which we're referencing Inventor. All right. So in order to get into the debugging, we're going to go debug, and then we're going to do step into. And what this does is it runs through the code line by line. So I'm going to go to where I have the debug line. I'm going to double click, and then I'm going to use what's called Quick Watch. So you can do Shift F9 or Quick Watch. I'm going to add that, and now I can open this up, and I have a live object model. So I know that in order to get down into my features, I'm going to have to get not only into this application, but I'm also going to have to get the active document. Boom, right there. Okay, so next, now to where I want to go. Oh, let's scan through. Oh, we need our component definition. So I'm going to grab that. So that makes reference back to my part. Keep going down. Oh, all right. So now we know that a fillet is part of a feature. So I'm going to go into my features. And then now we have access to our fillet features object in here. So we even get a little count. See how it's showing 2? We have 2 fillet features inside of my model. So this is completely live. It's an excellent resource. You even get like types. It gives you context on the right-hand side. But now in my mind, I already kind of know which way I want to get there. All that's left to me is really writing the code. So I'm going to pull this down. All right, so I'm going to stop that debug real quick. So first things first is getting access to that part document. So I'm going to dim this part doc. Part. See how this pops up? This is IntelliSense. So I can define this as a part document, and I'm going to set the variable. So we're going to start this. Dot. All right, active document. We know that we needed that. Next, I'm going to try to access the fillet features. So I'm going to go fillet features. Boom, there we go. There's our collection object, fillet features. So let's set that guy. So we know that we have to go from this application through the active document. So what I can use is actually that opart doc to begin that stage, hit the point.
And so that just makes it so that the opart doc is referencing the 2 lines above it, which is
right.
This application.active document.
You can write these things out as like one giant string out, like just a huge long line. However, there might be bits and pieces of that code that you want to reuse elsewhere.
Right.
So it's handy to break it down into like little common sections.
Right.
So that way, if I ever have to reference back to this part document for anything later in my code, I don't have to re-specify it. I can just use that opart doc.
Right. And so yeah, I used way too many variables for things when I'm writing stuff like this. And yeah, like Grayson said, like it's more than likely that you're going to have to reference this application.active document somewhere else down the road. So it just makes it easier if you set that variable nice and early, so that you can go in there and not have to write that over and over again, because I know that can be a huge pain.
Okay, so now we have access to the fillet features collection object. We need to now move through that in order to identify a fillet 1 or fillet 2. And the way that we can do that is using what is called a for2 statement, and then also an integer-based value. So I'm going to use I as an integer. And then what I'm going to say here is, for I is equal to 1, which will be the first one that pops up, to our fillet features dot count. All right. So what this means right here is that for everything from 1 until the total of amount of fillets that we have, which in our case is 2, it's going to look for that whole range. So now we're going to go ahead and specify out the specific fillet. So I'm going to dim fillet as a fillet feature. Remember, a standard object. So we're going to set that. We're going to make reference back to our fillet features collection. And then we're going to set this reference to that I variable. So what this is going to do is, as it's going to go through this process, it's going to go, hey, I'm going to set this to the first instance and then the second instance. Now, we know from this code in the starting that we wanted to set this up so that we are only deleting out a specific fillet, and that was going to be fillet 1. So to call that, we need to figure out, hey, how am I going to identify that? And this is really when I get into the object browser itself. So I'm going to go view. I'm going to go object browser. And then I can see in here, okay, so I got my fillet feature. And then this little section here, this members, I have a list of everything that I can do. And right there we have delete. So now that I know, after I call out and specify what my fillet feature is, I can then use it to delete. So let's go back to my code. So I'm going to go if oFillet.name is equal to fillet 1.
And so that's the actual fillet name in the model browser. If
Yep.
you look over to the left-hand side there.
Yes, that's this guy
So
right
looking
here.
for that exact.
Then we're going to put another one in here. We're going to go, if, we're going to make a message box, kind of like a little dialogue that pops up. Let's say, do you wish to delete? Comma, and then we're going to put a little dialog box in there. See the little VB yes, no? Awesome. If that is equal to VB yes, meaning that I picked out yes, then I'm going to do an oFillet.delete. So that's going to delete that out. But, maybe I don't want to do that. If I pick anything else, I'm going to just do an else statement real quick, and then I'm going to say that message box and that fillet wasn't deleted.
And if you know anything about Grayston, Grayston is a big fan of the message boxes.
I love message boxes. They're excellent ways of figuring out where the code broke or what's going on, making sure you access what you need, extracting properties. It's something that I like to do. Not everybody does it, but I like to recommend it. It's helped me out a lot learning this stuff. So let's do another end if statement here, and let's end this guy. And then let's close out our for loop with a next. And then that should be it. Okay, so we got our code. So let's go ahead and play it. All right, look at that. Do you wish to delete? I'm going to hit no just for fun. Okay, fillet wasn't deleted. Let's play this again. But this time I'm going to click yes. And my fillet disappeared.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! That's really all there is to it. Let me close this out. You can access these through this little macros button. You can see that I have this little macro already stored for this part, this document.fillet delete. You can set these up so all your macros exist in a local directory. You can put them on a server. That way everybody can share them. You have different options here. That's a little bit different from iLogic, where things are set up as like an internal or an external rule. But yeah, that's a quick little kind of blurb into API and how that works.
Yep. And not necessarily going to use it to delete fillets like this when you could just go to the browser and hit the delete button.
Right.
But essentially we're showing how that process happens. And you can what's the word I'm looking for here? You can complicate the process as much as possible. You can get into crazy stuff. As long as it's reachable by the API, you can manipulate it, right? So you can change things like some of those parameter values for maybe that fillet itself. Maybe you want to standardize all of the fillet sizes to something. Maybe you want to change all the fillets to chamfers. You can do that.
You could create the fillets. Let's say if you want to change all fillets to chamfers, you could have it scan through the browser, grab all the fillets, delete those out, and then replace them with the chamfer. All just using the VBA code. It's minimizing those human inputs as much as possible, so that not only do you minimize errors, but it also increases your efficiency. And then you have time spent to do things that actually matter, and you're not just it's not repetitive. It's just, I can actually work on the things that I need to work on and let this coding and the software take care of all that background work that I need to do normally.
Yep. And so, I mean, Grayston has, I don't know if you've seen it, if people have been in the office, Grayston's got a giant picture on his desk of the entire object model.
Yeah.
And so, that's just something that I want to print out at my desk. I need to find a printer that big. So it's something, you know, keep handy.
If you have a plotter at the work of a 22 by 36, just use that.
I'm sure that's how you did
what
it.
mine is.
And then you just laminated it.
Yeah.
It's good
Print it
stuff.
out, laminate it, stick it on the wall.
Yeah, great. Do you want to show people how to get to that? If like,
Yeah,
if they don't know.
I don't believe I have that one installed, but here, let me just pop up my Chrome.
this is the easiest way to find it.
Inventor, object, browser.
You want the model.
Oop, object model. That's my bad. I think 2016 was actually the last one they put up.
Might be
They've
2017.
added a few extra things in there since then.
Yeah, so download this PDF and print it. And we can see like how,
That's the object model.
yeah, nice and small print.
Yes, but it's massive. Like you can kind of see it in here. You just start talking a little bit about kind of how you iterate through all of this and get really, really down into, say, like, oh, I'm going to create a sweep, or even inside my assembly documents and my drawings, I can actually create sketches and rectangles and add notes. And
You can drop base views for drawings.
we just had a class where we were going over how to create drawing views and adding dimensions. It's cool stuff. It's just, you know, when I was still working in industry, you got 5 or 6 projects going on. You just need more time. Like, time is the most valuable resource that you have. And if I can take something that would normally take me 3 days to where I just click a button and it gives me an output in like 5 minutes, I mean, that's a real life example. I mean, we had these basket strainers that were on every single project that would take 2 to 3 days to model and spit out a drawing. And eventually got to the point where I was just so tired of doing it that I wrote a code, and it would construct it, it would add all the views, and then we'd get a finished drawing that we could just hand off to procurement and fabrication, and I was done. That was 3 extra days that I could spend working on the general design. That was 3 extra days that I could spend using checking other drawings that we didn't have. Like, it was just, it's such a powerful tool for just that alone, just giving yourself more time.
Yeah, and Grayson, like now that you're back off of your like little, we'll call it sabbatical / hiatus / working on projects.
Yeah.
Now you're working on a ton of projects.
Yep. Lots of automation.
Is there anything you can share in regards to, you know, what kind of product lines? We obviously can't say who we're working on projects for, but you know, just to get ideas into people's heads as to what you can use this for. I know you can't get super detailed with that.
Yeah, so if you have anything that's configurable and you are trying to extract something out of that, definitely look at API. I know we talked about iLogic being more for configurations, but that's basically going to stop once you get to the point of trying to make a master model. We've run into a lot of people using iLogic with lots of suppressions and replacing out components. That alone starts entering a category of, hey, this is taking me like 20 minutes to 30 minutes to run. You can alleviate a lot of that using API and like things like transient geometry and dropping them in. Some of the other things we've been working on are really just like drawing creation for like AutoCAD. This will all work in AutoCAD. So AutoCAD has an object model just like this.
It's just obviously different.
It's different. Yeah, you're not going to have like 3D and everything so much in it, but they talk to one another. And that's the important thing, is I can have something set up in Inventor that talks to AutoCAD and then AutoCAD back to Inventor just using API. Like, that's the whole point of it. I can have it talk to Excel. I can have it talk to pretty much any software. It's like, that's what allows a third-party software to access this.
Exactly. And I know Eric, who's probably listening to this because he's our tech guy on the back end. He's working on an API project too. Yep. Just not in Inventor.
Nope.
It's in Vault, which I'm assuming most of the people on this call are using. Essentially what it does, and I know because I'm the one getting the notification emails for this, is every time there is a state change on a set of parts or a set of documents within Vault, it emails a certain group of people to notify them that, hey, you know, this file or group of files got changed from WIP to released. It tells you what files they are, tells you what folder they're in, things like that. Just another thing that API is being used for.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you spend some time, take a look at that object model, go in here, look at the object browser, just kind of scan around and just see, hey, what can I really access in here? And it's really just as simple as typing something. So if I want to like see what I have for document, I just go in here. Now I have access to all my classes, the members. I can come in here. I can see what it's talking about. It helps understanding what am I looking at here?
Exactly.
What can I really do with this? And as long as you're asking those questions to yourself, you'll be able to ask them to the software, and then you'll be able to get the software to do it.
Definitely. I look at the object model as like a roadmap to get to a certain function. So, you know, say for example, you wanted to add a drawing base view, just because this example came up earlier this week. If you want to add a drawing base view, go find like the base view insert and then work backwards from there.
You walk drawing view, boom. All right. So we got drawing views. We can make different level of design details. We can create views. You can delete views out. You can do detail drawing views, section views. I mean, it's all there. You just gotta look through it.
It is indeed all there. It is. And so Grayson, you're using Visual Basic for a lot of this stuff. Say you were familiar with writing another language, say C# or something like Python. Can you write in that language and bring it into Inventor, or does it have to be in this VB format?
I believe that it'll take C#. Don't quote me on that, because I've always used VB. It was just what was written in here. It was what I learned on, and I've just always used it. So I've always looked at, hey, if you can write C# or C++, those are extremely complicated in my mind to write compared to like VB, Java, or more of those kind of, it's not phonetics, not the word, but like you read it like a book. If you can understand that, then you should have no problem writing in VB or VBA.NET. I mean, it's all available there for you. There's tons of resources online on how do I use some of these terminologies. So if-then statements for each, we're talking about like integers a little bit. You do select cases. I mean, it's all the same. It's all the same.
Yeah, so if you already wrote something, you can't, so essentially what Gray's saying is you can't necessarily write it in here in Python per se, but he's saying that, and we're saying that if you already understand a complex language like that, that they already put you a step ahead of everyone who doesn't. And VB is generally a little bit easier to understand than some of those complex programming languages.
Right, and don't be afraid of this. If you don't have programming language, I didn't when I started at all. I had to just learn as I went. I spent a ton of time in just the iLogic and learning how to write conditional statements inside of there, pretty much up to the point where I couldn't do the things I wanted to do with iLogic. I hit a wall. And it wasn't until after that wall that I started really going, okay, what else can I do? And I got into API, and then it's just been a whirlwind since. I'm constantly learning new things. I'm constantly figuring out how to access things I've never seen before, how to do some really, really tricky processes. But get familiar with the basics, understand parameters and how those work. You can use iLogic and VB.NET in combination. So you can have like VB.NET codes that pull off different rules, and you can have like it's this awesome architecture that's available to you.
Cool, makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and just answer a couple of questions as we're moving through here. There are a few. So I mean, if anyone does have any more questions, feel free to type them in, and we'll take care of those. The first one is, can you import code directly from Microsoft Visual Studio into the VBA editor in Inventor?
What do you mean by import? I believe you can copy and paste it. That's not a problem. But I'm not sure if you mean like import the source code or like the solution. We can definitely circle back around with you on that. So did they leave their information? Or
yeah, we can circle back.
We're gonna chat to you. I want to know a little bit more about what you're trying to do.
For that one, yeah. So let's see here. You can write it in either or, right? It's the same thing. Visual Studio and the VB editor, it's like pretty much the same thing. So you could theoretically just copy and paste over. Can you do copy design with VBA?
Hi, David, by the way. Good to hear from you. All right, so let's see. Can we make copy design with VBA? Interesting. So My gut reaction is it wouldn't be through Inventor, but
It'd
that
be
would be
through
more
Vault.
of a Vault API thing. I'm not intimately familiar with Vault API. However, we do have a resource on hand that is getting to that point. And my gut is saying that yes, you should be able to do copy design considering that is a function. Now, how you get through that process, I'm gonna have to take a look. It sounds possible, definitely.
It sounds
possible.
Yeah,
I
think
can't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah, I definitely want to know what the use case would be. I'm assuming you've got a design that you need to copy, but what options would you need? So, well, we can definitely circle back and talk to you, David, about that. But I mean, if it's possible in the software, it's almost always possible with API. There's a couple of exceptions, things like frame generator, tube and pipe.
Yeah, those are can't access those too much, but you can control different things with them.
Yeah, I mean, you could write API code to do a frame generator-esque thing, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a whole.
Just like
let's
just rewrite frame generator, right? Any suggestions on reference books for learning API for both Inventor or VaultGray?
Yes, there are some excellent blog resources online for a lot of this that I have spent numerous hours just poring over. I believe Mod the Machine is one that I highly recommend. I believe Brian Eakins is the guy that really wrote the API for Inventor, and he's been an excellent resource for just myself learning these things. I haven't found any API books. It's more like, hey, here's how to use VBNet or VBA, and then you take that and apply it to, say, Inventor's API.
Exactly. And I think like the big thing is like, oh, if you're looking for a resource to learn it, print the object model and put it in front of your face. Because then you can figure out like, oh, is this even possible? Like where would I even look for this? I think just studying the object model a lot is going to be the key to doing all of this. You're like, okay, well, I can access this. Can I go one level deeper and access this? And so, yeah, that's my reference is that big piece of paper on Gray's desk.
All right, we got somebody else from Guillermo. Let's see. Oh, Inventor SDKs. Some more questions coming in.
Yeah, will the interpreter in Inventor automatically detect what language I'm writing the program in, or do I have to tell it? Like if I write the program in a text editor and then copy and paste, would Inventor interpret and compile and execute? I've never tried typing like iLogic code in Notepad and then pasting it in. Will it automatically detect the parameters?
Yeah, because it's just, I mean, it'll be fine as long as it's written. Like that's the kind of thing, like I could take what I just wrote, copy that and place it into text. And then if I brought it back in, like it would still read out the exact same way.
Yeah.
It's not like when you're writing it, it's assigning stuff to those variables or those parameters. It's just the IntelliSense is just letting you know, hey, I have these options as I'm writing out the code.
Yeah, so I guess you could write it in like a text editor if you want. I suggest not doing that. Bringing it back could like screw up with some formatting too, especially like as you can see, Gray was using a bunch of tabs. And tab is really important because you can know
housekeeping.
Yeah, because you understand what function goes where, right? And when a particular like loop ends, you know, what's tied to what and what is a parent of what kind of. So.
Oh, we got a whole bunch of coming in. Let's see.
When I want to remove a part from my model, I set the component BOM structure to reference, and then I write a for/each statement that says, for each reference part in the assembly, set visibility to false. I prefer to use suppression to free up system memory, but when I suppress a part, any rules that reference that part crash. Any suggestions on that?
First off, don't use reference. I'm not a big fan. I rather you use Phantom if you want to definitely remove things from your bill of material. That way, it's not going to be displayed weird when you go to do your drawings, or when you do suppression, that's a whole nother bear. A lot of the time,
just suppressing parts can take a bunch of memory too.
I try to avoid suppression as much as possible outside of level of details. Use level of details to kind of get that information, and then you can use a combination of turning visibility off, making design views, and using phantom representation for your bill of material structure to get the same result without losing all of the connectivity data that you have. So say like your dimensions or constraints, joints, things like that. There's other ways to kind of get the same result without having to worry about losing those connections, because I've had that happen numerous times to myself. It's just suppressing constantly. It should work. It just sometimes it loses that and you have to go back and refresh everything. And it's just, I try to avoid it for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely, Mark. If you have any questions about that, reach out to us. There's a couple of ways to do so. Grayson, you just want to open like a text editor and put your email up on the screen real quick?
Yes. So my email actually here.
You should just type it on this part.
Sketch.
Yeah, while he's doing that, I'll answer a couple more questions. I had someone in the back ask, or someone in the back tell me that there is a Vault blog for API stuff. It's called Vault. It's all ones and zeros. Literally, if you use that as a string, like, and type that into Google, you'll find the Vault blog. I think it's written by people at Autodesk.
Let's see, Notepad.
That'd be sweet if you had it like as written iLogic or API code and had it like automatically generate.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I should do that.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. We'll make like sweet animations. We'll have it like fly across the screen and stuff. It'd be cool stuff like that.
Email grayson.donovan@Katif. Just send your questions over that way. And it looks like I'm going to have a lot, so this is cool. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around to the end. I know we're running a little bit long here, but I hope this was a good introduction into it. I get really excited about API. I love it. It's been a lifesaver for me numerous times, and so I love talking about it. Please reach out, give us more ideas, and we can definitely do more webcasts on this.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to see more webcasts on this, maybe particular specific functions and stuff, let us know, and we can see how much of Grayson's time we can steal, because he's always busy.
Yeah.
But if there is a need, if people are like specifically requesting Grayson Donovan on AVA, it has to happen.
It has to happen.
So definitely let us know. Thanks again, everybody, for being here today for this. Next week's going to be really cool. Next week's AVA is actually live only. There's going to be no recording for next week, I think is what we've come to the conclusion of. So definitely very special. Essentially, we're going to be doing our Vault Basic training, an accelerated version of our Vault Basic training live on AVA. So it'll be kind of cool. It'll be 2 hours long too. So if you want a refresher on how to use Vault, you know, some best practices for stuff like that. I know why the camera's not even on. I'm looking at it. But if you do want a refresher on some best practices and how to use Vault, maybe you haven't even started using Vault and want to learn how to use it in your workflow, mainly probably in Inventor workflows, maybe some AutoCAD workflows as well. Definitely stay tuned. It's going to be a long one next week, so definitely stay tuned for that. It's going to be Jorge Fernandez, who is also a frequent AVA-er himself. But again, thank you everybody for being here today. Hopefully you guys start using some automation in your designs to kind of open up some of those doors into figuring out, hey, where do I start? What can I do? If Inventor can do it, API can do it for the most part.
I already am getting emails, so that's good.
Cool. Thanks again, Grayson, for being here today. We'll see everybody next week, and we'll talk to you later.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.